Everybody, Pastor Matt here. I just wanted to spend some time, next few minutes, talking about some things that have come up in varying conversations, but also came up recently in our deacons meeting. We spent some time talking through our vision that we crafted back in 2022. We hear it in spits and spurts, but leaning into it a little more is something that we really need to be focusing on. I'm really glad for that. So, one of the things that came up was about being an invite culture, a culture that is inviting people not only to Jesus, but also to Arapahoe Road. There's some things that always tend to come up when we think about inviting someone, and sometimes we can get to where we overthink it so much that we end up not inviting. We overthink what we're going to say. We overthink about, well, maybe they don't want to come to a church like ours because they may be a certain age and that we may not be their groove, and then we, you see, we can spend so much time talking ourselves out of it that we end up just going weeks, if not months, without telling people about Jesus, without inviting them to church. It just gets to be where it's just something that, for us, we know each other. We kind of know each other as family. We know the ebbs and flows. We're friendly to each other. And I think God has us here in our neighborhood, and He puts people in our sphere of influence for a reason. And so, some questions that have come up. I've answered over the years, but I don't know if I've ever put it all together. So, what I'd like to do is just go through some things that I've thrown up on a PowerPoint, and we'll just go right here and start the slideshow here. Let me. So, developing an invite culture. You would think that well, let me just put it this way. Some of the things I'm going to say, you're going to be like, well, yeah, of course. Well, that's what we're all about. Sometimes life hits us. Sometimes urgent things happen around the church, and we may find ourselves forgetting about some of these ongoing, day-to-day important things that we need to be doing. So the one of the values that we have when it comes to this particular deal is making sure that we are connecting all people to the truth and hope in Jesus. That's our mission. That's what God's called us to do. When we're talking about connecting, that's exactly right. Connecting people to what Christ has done in the truth and the hope that He gives us. This was coming out of COVID when hope was at a minimum, but now with Christ, we know that hope is absolutely at a maximum. And so we want to make sure that we're going through this. Now, I'm not a big AI guy. I gotta admit it to you. I know some of you may use it. I know when we're teaching class at Colorado Christian University, there's some that use AI wall to wall for their research. I don't like it, and even this, I'm a little hesitant to show you because I put this in one of the Google. It's called Notebook LM, and I put our stuff into that, and 30 seconds later, it spit this out. It's such a great picture. So bear with me. Try not to judge me too harshly on this, but these are our core values. You see, equipping the word, knowing his word is essential for life and ministry. Exalt Christ in worship, a personal and corporate outward expression of exalting Christ. Engage in gospel community, connecting in gospel centered relationships inside and outside the church. And then embrace the Great Commission, reaching people with the light of the gospel. What invite culture now is going to be talking about is this right here: engaging in gospel community, connecting in gospel centered relationships inside and outside the church. Here's some things that I have in mind for us. So, developing a DNA for gospel community takes grit. Now, we are looking right now at the particular things that God has given to you as He has wired you to move forward. Gifts, that is spiritual gifts. First Corinthians 12, Romans 12 talks about the spiritual gifts. First Peter 4 is talking about how each of the gifts are categorized into speaking gifts and serving gifts. And God has given you as a Christian gifts, spiritual gifts. You can either find out about them taking a spiritual gifts test. Okay. You can also find out about them when it comes to, let me go back, sorry, when it comes to um, just living life and figuring out what works for you and what doesn't, what is in your wheelhouse and what isn't. Resources, God gives us money. He gives us things to be able to help fund those things. Interests, you may have an interest. Somebody's already come up to me and said, I'd like to start a sewing class for the community. Somebody else has talked about helping people understand how cars work, right? That is an interest that God has given to you, an ability that God has given to you, talents like teaching piano, things along that line. It's thinking through and just thinking a little bit further on casting that wider net in your own heart and mind to say, okay, God's given me this ability, this talent, this love, these resources, these gifts. What can I do to help connect those things and help can use those connect other people to the truth and hope in Jesus? Okay. So now part of the issue that can come up is really just trying to sometimes start a conversation. Many of us may be a little more introverted. We may be, well, we just may not have developed that muscle, right? Some of you, you may have grown up with people coming over to the house all the time, doing all sorts of things. That was not how I grew up. We moved around quite a bit. It just wasn't something that ever happened. And so, starting a conversation and putting yourself out there and trusting the Lord and trusting yourself to be able to handle it and just to move forward well, it can be great. It can be helpful, but it also can be a pain line that many people have to go over. So psychologists, and sometimes I think even with some people that have put together a well, how do we put it? Where you can share the gospel, an evangelistic program they put together, and that's one of the things that people end up using. This is something that people end up using to start that conversation, where you start talking to people about family and friends. You know, so you find out that someone has moved out here. You're standing in line with someone, and suddenly a conversation starts up. People will talk to you about your family. People will talk to you about your friends. Usually, maybe not everyone, but I don't. When I'm wearing like right here, there are times when I'm out and I'm wearing my Louisville sweatshirt or I'm wearing my Cincinnati Reds hat. That can be a conversation starter too. And there, because someone from that area might be like, wait a minute, are you from? Because I'm from, right? I've gotten into a lot of conversations that way because so many people here in Denver from so many other places. So that can get into recreation. So we'll put a pin in that. But family and friends, occupation. Hey, what do you do? What do you do for a living? Right. And so you start telling people about that. There may be some connective tissue there. And you start asking them questions about that and show a genuine interest in what they're saying. Recreation. Well, there's a lot of recreation out here. I tend to like sports. I like music. I like writing. I like the scriptures. There's a lot of different things. I love talking about national parks. And so if you begin to talk to people, you might find as you're talking through this a thread that you can hold on to and say, "Oh, I heard that you said that you like this. Oh, yeah, I used to be there. I used to understand this. I used to be a part of that." And then you can get a conversation rolling there. Motivation is where the psychologists come in. That means what fires you up, what gets you rolling, what's your purpose in life, what motivates you to get out of bed and get after it. And so the motivation for us can turn into the message. The message. And that's what I want us to look. Let that motivation turn into the message. So you start asking people, like for instance, um, William Fay did this thing called Share Jesus Without Fear. And one of the questions that he would ask is, do you have any spiritual belief? Do you have any spiritual belief? And give them room to tell you what it is. And then you can share yours. Now, Bill Fay even would have a little New Testament with him, and he would put in Bible verses upside down so that way he could turn it around and he could read the Bible verse that he was supposed to be sharing while they are reading a passage of scripture. You're going to have to really gauge whether your audience is willing to do that, because now there are so many people that are willing to ask so many other questions that may be a little outside of our scope, but it gives us an opportunity to start studying and to look into those things. But our motivation, really, Christ is our motivation in life. He is the greatest message that we have. And so we let that motivation turn into the message. And some of this will just take some practice. So here we are. Let me lower this a bit. Your motivation comes really from two stories. There's his story, which is the gospel. And we've given you these particular, excuse me, we've given you these little wristbands that outline what is mentioned here with the gospel. God's design. Getting away from God's design is sin, that leads to brokenness. And we try to find all these other ways to fix our brokenness, but it takes us further away from God's design. But with the gospel, the good news of Jesus, who fixes our sin, who takes our sin upon himself and cures our brokenness, if we repent from our sin and believe in the gospel. So we're repenting from something and we're trusting in something. The gospel of Jesus Christ restores us and helps us to recover and pursue God's design for our life. I include this and I love this because it's easy to remember, it's faithful to the gospel, and you can put it on a napkin. So there's this. And I'm going to encourage you to read Acts 22, 3 to 21, which we talked a little bit about that last year at a Saturday study, where it's talking about you developing your testimony. Your testimony, which is talking about, as you read through Acts 22, you're going to see how Paul is talking about what happens when you come, before you come to Christ. Tell people about how your life was before you came to Christ, the encounter you had with Christ, and the change that Christ brings.